Alexander Reid swirled the amber whiskey in his crystal tumbler, the ice clinking softly as he leaned back in his leather chair. The private room at the Obsidian Club, an exclusive sanctuary for Manhattan's elite, buzzed with the quiet confidence of men who controlled empires from corner offices. Outside, rain pattered against floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city's glittering skyline. "I'm telling you, Alex," drawled Victor Harrington, his third-generation hedge fund manager and self-proclaimed best friend, "marriage is nothing but a financial transaction dressed up in white lace and empty promises." He loosened his silk tie and raised his glass. "To another quarter of record profits, and the freedom to enjoy them however we damn well please." The other men around the table, Jordan, Christopher, and Marcus, raised their glasses in agreement, but Alex merely offered a tight smile. At 36, he had amassed a fortune that placed him comfortably among New York's financial royalty. Reid Capital Management handled billions, and as its founder and CEO, Alex enjoyed the fruits of his labor: the penthouse overlooking Central Park, the collection of vintage cars, the private jet. What he didn't have, what he hadn't allowed himself since Sophia left, was someone to share it with. "You know what your problem is, Alex," Victor continued, never one to let silence linger. "You still believe in the fairy tale, the soulmate, the happily ever after." He snorted. "How's that working out for you? 5 years since Sophia ran off with that artist, and you're still alone in that mausoleum you call a home." Alex's jaw tightened. "Not all of us view relationships as disposable, Victor." "No," Victor agreed with a smirk. "Some of us don't have relationships at all." Laughter rippled around the table, and Alex felt a familiar anger stirring. Victor had a talent for finding raw nerves and pressing on them, a habit that had only worsened since his own divorce 2 years ago. "I could get married tomorrow if I wanted to," Alex said, immediately regretting the defensive tone in his voice. "Of course you could," Victor replied, leaning forward. "Half the women in New York would sprint to the altar for a piece of your fortune. But that's my point, it's your money they want, not you. Not everyone is as cynical as you, Victor. Not cynical. Realistic." Victor's eyes gleamed with sudden mischief, a look Alex had come to distrust since their prep school days. "In fact, I'm so sure of it that I'm willing to put money on it." Jordan Chun, usually the quietest of their group, set down his glass. "What are you suggesting, Victor?" "A wager." Victor's gaze remained fixed on Alex. "To prove that marriage is nothing but a transaction." "I'm not interested," Alex said flatly. $5 million, Victor countered. "Tax-free. I'll donate it to that children's charity you're always going on about." The table fell silent. $5 million would fund the expansion of the pediatric cancer wing that Alex had been championing for months. "What's the bet?" Christopher asked, leaning forward. Victor's smile widened. "Alex marries someone completely outside his usual type. Someone no one would believe he'd fall for. Someone who doesn't fit the trophy wife mold that men like us are expected to choose." "That's vague," Marcus commented. "Fine." Victor pulled out his phone, fingers moving rapidly across the screen. "I have someone specific in mind. My assistant's cousin. She works at the public library downtown." He turned the phone to show a social media profile photo of a woman with a round face and an even rounder body, dressed in a floral dress that did little to flatter her considerable size. Eleanor Winters, 32. Smart by all accounts, but about 100 pounds overweight. Alex stared at the image, disgust rising not at the woman, but at Victor's casual cruelty. "This is low even for you." "Is it?" Victor challenged. "I'm offering her the chance to marry one of New York's most eligible bachelors. I'm offering you the chance to fund your pet project. And I'm proving my point about marriage." "The terms?" Marcus asked, ever the lawyer, even when off the clock. Victor set down his phone. 1 year of marriage. Real marriage, you live together, appear in public together, the whole show. If you go through with it, I pay the $5 million to the charity, win or lose." "And what do you get out of this?" Alex demanded. "The satisfaction of being right. After a year, you'll divorce her, proving that marriage is just a contract that can be entered into and dissolved for the right price." Victor's smile turned predatory. "Unless, of course, you actually fall in love with her." The room filled with laughter again, but Alex didn't join in. He couldn't tear his eyes from the woman's photo. There was something in her smile, a genuine warmth that seemed out of place in this cold discussion. "This is insane," Jordan interjected. "You can't seriously expect Alex to." "I'll do it," Alex said quietly. The words hung in the air, surprising even himself. "What?" Christopher blinked. "I said I'll do it. $5 million for the children's hospital, guaranteed up front. But we do this my way." Alex straightened his shoulders. "No one tells her about the bet. Ever. She thinks it's real." Victor's eyebrows shot up. "That's darker than I expected from you, Alex." "Is it?" "You're the one who wanted to use a stranger as a pawn in your game." Alex's voice was cold. "I'm just ensuring that she doesn't get hurt in the process. She'll get a generous divorce settlement. I'll add another $5 million for her. And the hospital gets funded. Everyone wins." Marcus cleared his throat. "Except for the woman who thinks she found love only to have it end after exactly 1 year." Alex felt a twinge of guilt but pushed it aside. "Better than never having had it at all," he said, echoing something his mother used to say before cancer took her. Victor extended his hand across the table. "We have a deal then. The clock starts when you say I do." As Alex shook Victor's hand, he told himself this was purely business, a means to an end. Just 1 year of his life to secure funding for a project that would save children's lives. He had made sacrifices for business before. This was no different. But as he glanced one more time at Eleanor's smiling face on Victor's phone, something in his chest tightened uncomfortably. 2 weeks later, Alex found himself walking into the main branch of the New York Public Library, a building he hadn't visited since his college days. The grand reading room was as impressive as he remembered, with its ornate ceiling and long oak tables. But he wasn't there for the architecture. According to Victor's information, Eleanor Winters worked in the rare books collection, a department tucked away from the main public areas. Alex had dressed down for the occasion, wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt instead of his usual tailored suit. The less he looked like a billionaire, the better. He approached the reference desk, where a young man with thick glasses looked up from his computer. "I'm looking for Eleanor Winters," Alex said. "I understand she works with the rare book collection?" The young man nodded. "She's in the conservation lab right now. Down that hallway, last door on the left. You'll need to knock. They keep it locked to control the environment." Alex thanked him and followed the directions, rehearsing the story he and Victor had concocted. He was researching his family history and needed assistance with some obscure texts. It wasn't much, but it would get him in the door. The rest would depend on his ability to charm something that had never failed him in business. He knocked on the heavy wooden door, hearing soft movements inside before it opened to reveal a woman he recognized from the photo, though the image hadn't done justice to her warm brown eyes or the subtle highlights in her chestnut hair. She wore a simple navy dress with a cardigan, practical flat shoes, and no makeup that he could discern. She was, without question, obese, but her face had a symmetry and her skin a clarity that he hadn't expected. "Can I help you?" she asked, and Alex was caught off guard by the musical quality of her voice. "I hope so," he said, slipping into the easy confidence that had served him well in countless negotiations. "I'm Alexander Reid. I was told you might be able to help me with some research I'm doing." Eleanor tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intelligence that made him uncomfortably aware of how flimsy his pretext was. "What kind of research, Mr. Reid?" "Family history," he replied. "I've traced my ancestors to Scotland in the late 1700s, and I'm trying to find more specific information. The reference librarian thought your collection might have some relevant texts." She studied him for a moment longer, then stepped back. "Come in. I'm in the middle of a restoration project, but I can spare a few minutes." The lab was a marvel of organization, with specialized equipment and carefully controlled lighting. Several ancient-looking books lay open on a central table, surrounded by tools Alex couldn't identify. "Sorry about the mess," Eleanor said, gesturing to what appeared to Alex to be a meticulously organized workspace. "I'm repairing a first edition of Blake's Songs of Innocence and Experience. The binding is giving me fits." Alex moved closer to look at the book, genuinely impressed by the delicate work in progress. "It doesn't look like a mess to me. It looks like art." A smile flickered across Eleanor's face, the same warm smile from the photo. "That's kind of you to say. Most people don't appreciate the craftsmanship involved in restoration." My father collected rare books, Alex said, the truth slipping out unexpected. Not anything as valuable as this, but he taught me to respect the work that goes into preserving them. Your father has good taste. Had, Alex corrected quietly. He passed away 10 years ago. Something shifted in Eleanor's expression, a softening that made Alex realize he'd inadvertently veered from his script into genuine territory. I'm sorry for your loss, she said, and unlike the hundreds of times he'd heard those words at the funeral and in the weeks after, she sounded like she meant it. Alex cleared his throat. Thank you. Now, about those Scottish records. For the next 30 minutes, Eleanor showed him various resources that might help with his fictional research, demonstrating a knowledge of historical texts that impressed even him. She moved with surprising grace for someone her size, navigating the cramped lab with practiced ease. You really know your stuff, he commented as she pulled another reference book from a high shelf. It's my job, she replied simply. And my passion. Not many people can say those are the same thing. Alex thought of his own career, the years of relentless work, the fortune he'd built, the respect he'd earned. No, he agreed. They can't. When he finally made his exit, armed with actual research materials he had no intention of using, he found himself thinking not about the bet or the hospital wing, but about the way Eleanor's eyes had lit up when she talked about her work. This would be more complicated than he'd anticipated. You did what? Alex winced at the volume of his sister Madeline's voice over the phone. He had called her out of a sense of obligation. She was his only family, after all, but was already regretting the decision. It's a business arrangement, he said, keeping his voice even. The charity gets $5 million. Eleanor gets $5 million when we divorce. Everyone benefits. Except the woman who thinks she's marrying for love. Alex, this is despicable. He paced across his penthouse living room, the skyline twinkling beyond the windows. I didn't call for a lecture, Maddie. Well, you're getting one anyway. Have you even thought about how you're going to pull this off? You met her once. Are you just going to walk into that library tomorrow and propose? Of course not, Alex snapped, though in truth, he hadn't thought much beyond their first meeting. I'll court her, take her to dinner, get to know her, all while lying to her face. The blunt assessment hit harder than he expected. It's not ideal, he admitted, but think of the good that will come from it. The pediatric wing. Don't you dare use sick children to justify this, Madeline cut in. If you want to donate to the hospital, do it. You don't need to manipulate an innocent woman to make that happen. Alex sank onto his leather sofa. It's too late. I've made the deal with Victor. A heavy silence fell between them. You're better than this, Alex, Madeline finally said, her voice softer. You're better than Victor and his cruel games. Whatever he's tapped into your pride, your competitive streak, whatever, don't let it turn you into something you're not. But that was just it, wasn't it? Alex had spent years becoming exactly what was expected of him. Ruthless in business, charming in society, and utterly alone in what mattered. Perhaps it wasn't Victor who had changed him, but success itself. I'll handle it, he told his sister. I'll make sure Eleanor is taken care of. That's not the point, and you know it, Madeline sighed. Just promise me you'll be honest with yourself, even if you can't be honest with her. If at any point this feels wrong, more wrong than it already is, walk away. Victor's money isn't worth your soul. After ending the call, Alex stood at his window, looking down at the city that had given him everything he'd ever worked for. In the reflection of the glass, he saw not the confident CEO, but a man making a deal that, for the first time in his career, left a sour taste in his mouth. Yet the next morning found him walking back into the library, a carefully selected antique book under his arm, a peace offering, and an excuse to see Eleanor again. He told himself it was for the children's hospital. He told himself it was just business. But as he knocked on the conservation lab door, heart quickening at the sound of approaching footsteps, Alex Reid couldn't quite silence the voice in his head that sounded suspiciously like his sister's. You're better than this. Or perhaps the more terrifying possibility, maybe he wasn't. Eleanor Winters had long ago made peace with being invisible. In a city where physical appearance often determined one's social currency, her size rendered her practically non-existent to the beautiful people who dominated Manhattan's landscape. She had crafted a life around this reality, finding purpose in her work with ancient texts that valued preservation over presentation, building friendships with people who saw beyond the superficial, and training herself not to flinch when she caught reflections of herself in store windows. So when Alexander Reid appeared at the conservation lab for the third time in 2 weeks, a rare first edition of Robert Burns' poetry in hand to thank her for her help, Eleanor's internal alarm bells began to ring. "This is incredibly generous, Mr. Reid," she said, carefully examining the leather-bound volume, "but I can't accept it. It would be unprofessional." "Alex," he corrected with that easy smile that seemed to transform his already handsome face into something almost unfairly attractive. "And it's not for you to keep. I thought perhaps the library might appreciate it for their collection." Eleanor narrowed her eyes, slightly. "The library has an official donation process. There are forms, tax considerations." "I'm not interested in the tax write-off," he interrupted, leaning against her workbench with a casual confidence that suggested he was accustomed to occupying any space he chose. "Consider it an anonymous contribution." "There's no such thing as anonymity in New York," Eleanor replied, carefully setting the book aside. "Why are you really here, Mr. Reid? Your sudden interest in Scottish genealogy seems convenient." A flicker of something discomfort crossed his face before his composed expression returned. "I've been transparent about my interests." "Have you?" Eleanor challenged, surprising herself with her boldness. "Because I looked you up after your first visit." Alex stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Did you?" "Alexander Reid, CEO of Reid Capital Management." Eleanor watched his reaction carefully. A man worth billions doesn't typically spend his afternoons in a dusty conservation lab discussing obscure Scottish texts. A slow smile spread across his face, and Eleanor was struck by how genuine it seemed compared to his earlier practiced charm. "Caught. Though I object to the characterization of your lab as dusty. It's the cleanest space I've seen outside an operating room." Despite herself, Eleanor laughed. "Fair enough, but my question stands." Alex seemed to consider his answer carefully. "The truth? I found our conversation refreshing. Do you know how rare it is to meet someone who doesn't immediately try to pitch me an investment opportunity or introduce me to their single daughter? I imagine it's about as rare as someone asking me about my work instead of when I'm planning to start my diet," Eleanor replied dryly. Something shifted in Alex's expression, a softening that made Eleanor immediately regret her candor. The last thing she wanted was pity from a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a luxury watch advertisement. "I was hoping," Alex said after a moment, "that you might join me for dinner." Eleanor blinked, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry. Dinner," he repeated. "There's a new restaurant in Soho that's supposed to be excellent. The chef trained under." "Why?" Eleanor interrupted, her voice sharper than she intended. Alex looked genuinely confused. "Because people generally eat dinner, and it's more enjoyable with good company." "No." Eleanor shook her head. "Why me? Men like you don't ask women like me to dinner unless there's an agenda." She gestured to her ample form, encased today in a dark green dress that did little to disguise her size. "I'm not exactly your typical dinner companion." A shadow crossed Alex's face. "Men like me. Wealthy, conventionally attractive, powerful." Eleanor ticked off the attributes on her fingers. "The type who dates models and actresses, not overweight librarians." For a moment, Alex looked almost angry, but then his expression cleared. "Maybe I'm interested in substance over style." "Nobody in Manhattan is interested in substance over style," Eleanor countered. "I am." Alex's voice had dropped lower, with an intensity that made Eleanor's heart beat a little faster despite her better judgment. "Have dinner with me, Eleanor. One meal. If you find me unbearable, I promise never to darken your conservation lab again." Eleanor studied him, trying to decipher his motivations. In her 32 years, she had developed a finely tuned radar for insincerity, particularly from men. Her size had made her an occasional target for cruel jokes, fake interest, and even fetishization. But something about Alex's request felt different. There was an earnestness beneath his polished exterior that gave her pause. "Just dinner?" she asked cautiously. "Just dinner," he confirmed. "Though I reserve the right to hope for breakfast eventually." The flirtatious comment should have felt sleazy, but delivered with a slight smile and direct gaze, it instead sent an unexpected warmth through Eleanor's chest. "Friday," she said finally, "but I choose the restaurant." Alex's smile widened. "Deal." Eleanor chose a small Vietnamese place in Queens, far from the Manhattan hotspots where Alex might be recognized, and far from the kind of establishment where she would feel conspicuous. The tiny family-owned restaurant had been her secret comfort for years, with its mismatched chairs, chipped plates, and the best pho she'd ever tasted. When Alex arrived exactly on time, Eleanor was already seated at a corner table. She had spent an embarrassing amount of time deciding what to wear, finally settling on a dark blue wrap dress that her friend May insisted was flattering. She had even applied makeup, a rarity for her workdays, though she kept it minimal, just mascara, a touch of blush, and tinted lip balm. She watched Alex scan the room, noticing how seamlessly he shifted from Manhattan power player to approachable dinner guest. He had dressed down in dark jeans and a gray cashmere sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but the effect was understated rather than showy. "You found it," she said as he approached the table. "My driver did," he replied with a sheepish smile, taking the seat across from her. "Though I think he was convinced I had the wrong address." "Not your usual scene?" "Not recently," Alex admitted, "but it reminds me of places I used to go in college." "Before," he gestured vaguely. "Before you became a billionaire," Eleanor supplied. "Before life got complicated," he amended, then changed the subject. "How did you discover this place?" "My mother was Vietnamese," Eleanor explained. "After she died, I spent months trying to find a restaurant that made pho that tasted like hers." She gestured around the small space. "This is the closest I've found." Alex's expression softened. "I'm sorry about your mother." "It was a long time ago," Eleanor said, the practiced response coming automatically. "Cancer. I was 19. Alex nodded, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "My mother, too. I was 26. An unexpected connection, the shared language of grief that needed no elaboration. Eleanor found herself relaxing slightly. "What would you recommend?" Alex asked, picking up the laminated menu. "Everything," Eleanor replied with a genuine smile. "But start with the pho. It's transcendent." For the next 2 hours, they ate their way through several dishes, conversation flowing more easily than Eleanor had anticipated. Alex was surprisingly knowledgeable about a wide range of topics, from literature to architecture to international politics. He asked thoughtful questions about her work and actually listened to her answers, displaying none of the subtle dismissiveness she often encountered from men in positions of power. "So why rare books?" he asked as they shared a plate of mango sticky rice. "What drew you to restoration?" Eleanor considered the question. "There's something magical about holding an object that's survived centuries, that's been touched by countless hands and somehow made its way to you. Each book has its own journey, its own scars and repairs." She smiled slightly. "I relate to that, the idea that something can be damaged but still valuable, still worth preserving." Alex's gaze turned contemplative. "I've never thought of it that way." "Most people don't," Eleanor admitted. "They think I spend my days in white gloves turning pages for wealthy collectors. The reality is much more hands-on: chemical treatments, binding repairs, humidity control. It's as much science as art." "You love it," Alex observed. "I do," Eleanor agreed. "But enough about me. What about you? Did you always want to be a financial titan?" A shadow crossed Alex's face. "No, I wanted to be an architect." "What happened?" "My father died during my first year of graduate school. He left the company to me and my sister, but she was still in college." Alex's voice remained even, but Eleanor sensed the weight behind his words. Someone had to step in. That someone was me. "You gave up your dream," Eleanor said softly. Alex shrugged, the gesture too casual to be convincing. "I built something else instead. Reid Capital employs thousands of people. We've funded innovation in medical technology, sustainable energy, education. It's not what I planned, but it's not nothing." "No," Eleanor agreed, studying him with new interest. "It's definitely not nothing." As they walked out of the restaurant into the cool evening air, Eleanor found herself reluctant for the night to end. Alex had proven to be intelligent, thoughtful company, so different from the arrogant businessman she had expected. Thank you for dinner, Alex said, standing a respectful distance from her on the sidewalk. You were right about the foe. That wasn't dinner, Eleanor corrected with a small smile. That was just me vetting you to determine if you're worth having dinner with. Alex raised an eyebrow. And the verdict? Jury's still out, she teased. But I might be willing to collect more evidence. How about tomorrow? Alex suggested. My turn to choose. Eleanor hesitated. 2 nights in a row seemed eager, and she had promised herself years ago that she would never appear eager for male attention. It was a defensive strategy developed after one too many disappointments keep expectations low and avoid vulnerability. But Alex was looking at her with those intense blue eyes, and she found herself nodding. Tomorrow, but nothing too fancy. I don't own anything suitable for your world. You underestimate yourself, Alex said softly. But I'll keep it casual. As she watched his car pull away, Eleanor tried to ignore the flutter of excitement in her chest. One pleasant evening didn't erase a lifetime of evidence that men like Alexander Reid didn't seriously pursue women like her. Whatever his interest was, curiosity, boredom, some kind of personal challenge, it would pass. Better to enjoy it for what it was than to imagine it might be something more. Alex's definition of casual turned out to be a private dinner on the rooftop garden of his Tribeca penthouse, prepared by his personal chef. This is your idea of casual? Eleanor asked as he led her through the sleek, minimalist apartment to an elevator that opened directly into the space. It's just home, Alex replied, though he had the grace to look slightly abashed. I thought you might be more comfortable here than at a restaurant where people might stare. The comment landed like a stone in Eleanor's stomach. Because I'm fat, she said flatly. Alex stopped walking. What? No. Because I'm sometimes recognized, and the gossip columns can be vicious. I was trying to protect both of us from that. Oh. Eleanor felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have assumed. No, I'm sorry, Alex interrupted. That came out all wrong. I just wanted us to be able to talk without interruption or an audience. Eleanor nodded, trying to recover her equilibrium as they stepped into the elevator. When the doors opened again, she gasped despite herself. The rooftop had been transformed into a lush garden, with container trees and flowering plants creating natural walls around a central seating area. Strings of lights twinkled overhead, and a small table had been set near the edge, offering a panoramic view of the city. This is incredible, she breathed. It's my sanctuary, Alex said, watching her reaction with something like pleasure. When the city gets too much, I come up here. I can see why. Eleanor moved toward the edge, taking in the view of Manhattan spread below them like a glittering carpet. It's like being in another world. That's the idea, Alex agreed, joining her. Wine. The dinner that followed was exquisite, a multi-course affair that showed off the chef's talent without feeling pretentious. As they ate, their conversation flowed from books to travel to childhood memories, each revelation adding another dimension to the man Eleanor was rapidly finding herself drawn to. You went to Yale? She asked, surprised when he mentioned his alma mater. Undergrad in architecture school, Alex confirmed. Though I never finished the graduate program. I did my master's there, Eleanor said. In library science. We might have overlapped. I think I would have remembered you, Alex said, his gaze warm. Eleanor laughed. I doubt it. I was practically invisible, just another scholarship student huddled in the stacks. I can't imagine you being invisible anywhere, Alex replied, and something in his tone made Eleanor's heart skip a beat. After dinner, they sat side by side on a comfortable outdoor sofa, the city lights creating a magical backdrop as they sipped espresso. Can I ask you something personal? Alex said suddenly. Eleanor tensed slightly. Here it comes, she thought. The inevitable, awkward question about her weight, framed as concern or curiosity. Has your weight ever made dating difficult? And there it was. Eleanor set down her cup carefully. That's quite a question. Too direct. Alex asked. Too predictable, Eleanor corrected, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Let me save you the trouble of dancing around it. Yes, being fat has made dating challenging. Some men fetishize it, some are cruel about it, and most simply don't see me at all. Does that satisfy your curiosity? Alex looked genuinely taken aback. I didn't mean to offend you. Then why ask? Because, he said slowly, I'm trying to understand why someone as intelligent, cultured, and beautiful as you seem so suspicious of male attention. Eleanor blinked, momentarily thrown by the casual inclusion of beautiful in his list of adjectives. Beautiful is not a word typically applied to women my size, Alex. Then the men you've known have been idiots, he replied simply. A startled laugh escaped her. You're very good at this. At what? Saying exactly the right thing. Eleanor studied him. It makes me wonder if you practice. Something flickered in Alex's eyes, discomfort? Guilt. Before he smiled. Is it so hard to believe that I might genuinely find you attractive? Yes, Eleanor wanted to say. Everything I've experienced for 32 years tells me that men who look like you don't desire women who look like me without an ulterior motive. Instead, she said, I'm just trying to understand what this is. 2 dinners in 2 days feels like something. And I don't want to misinterpret. Alex was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. I enjoy your company, he finally said. You're different from the people I usually spend time with. You're real in a way that's rare in my world. And yes, I find you attractive, your eyes, your laugh, the way you get excited talking about your work. He paused. Is that so hard to believe? Put that way, it didn't sound impossible. Just improbable. I'm not looking for a charity project, Eleanor said carefully, or an experiment in dating outside your comfort zone. Good, Alex replied, because I'm not offering either of those things. He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive. His eyes dropped to her lips, and Eleanor felt a surge of both anticipation and panic. I should go, she said abruptly, standing up. It's getting late, and I have an early restoration workshop tomorrow. If Alex was disappointed, he didn't show it. He simply nodded and stood as well. Of course. I'll call you a car. As they waited for the elevator, an awkward silence fell between them for the first time that evening. Thank you for dinner, Eleanor said formally. Thank you for coming, Alex replied. Then, more softly, I meant what I said, Eleanor. Every word. In the sleek town car that Alex insisted on sending her home in, Eleanor stared out at the passing city lights, replaying the evening in her mind. If she were being honest with herself, she was attracted to Alex not just to his obvious physical appeal or his wealth, but to the complexity she glimpsed beneath his polished exterior.